Get ready for Changing Worldviews with Sharon Hughes, the 30-minute show packed with an hour's worth of information, bringing you familiar guests on important issues such as immigration, education, the Middle East, culture, religion, and the changing worldviews of Americans and the world. You've seen her on Fox News, you've read her on the World Wide Web. Now here's Sharon.
For such a time as this.
Freeing the minds of the brainwashed masses.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of Changing Worldviews. Today, talk show queen Oprah Winfrey, who went all out during the 2008 presidential election to help President Barack Obama win the White House, is spurning the Oval Office's advances when it comes to promoting the troubled Affordable Care Act, aka ObamaCare. Wow. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will not be meeting with Pope Francis during his visit to Rome on Wednesday, though he had planned to. The Vatican said that no such meeting will be taking place because audiences with the Pope must be arranged sufficiently in advance. This would have been Netanyahu's first meeting with the new Pope. Last Thursday, Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas met with the Pope and invited him to the Middle East. May take place in March. New Jersey officially now recognizes same-sex marriages. Early today, several New Jersey communities began recognizing same-sex marriages, marking the 14th state to do so. The year 2014 will be the year that New York City schools close for Muslim holidays. The city that witnessed the fall of the Twin Towers in 9/11 will be the largest school district to close for Islamic holidays. President Barack Obama acknowledged in a Monday speech that the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare Health Care Insurance Exchange website, healthcare.gov, has issues, but, quote, it's not just a website, it has a 1-800 number as well. And Belgium eyes child euthanasia. Since euthanasia was legalized in Belgium in 2002, Belgians have been euthanized for blindness, depression, anorexia nervosa, and a botched sex change operation. Now, Belgians want to allow euthanasia for children. Under legislation currently being debated in the Belgian parliament, terminally ill or suffering children under 18 could be euthanized if they request it. Their parents consent to it, and an expert deems the child capable of understanding their decision. This bill is widely supported and is expected to become law. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. My guest, Wesley J. Smith of the Discovery Institute and author of Forced Exit, talks about the very real realities of the increase of the acceptance of euthanasia for such issues as I've just listed and more. And all of this in light of the fact that there are death panels in Obamacare. We've talked about this on the show. And when we get back from this break, some of what we said about that, and then my interview with Wesley Smith. You do not want to miss today's show.
You're listening to Changing Worldviews with Sharon Hughes. Commentary on the news that's void of spin, but never short on passion. Now, here's more with Sharon.
Well, Obamacare, specifically death panels. Remember all the controversy about that when this whole issue was being debated. And if you recall, they removed the death panels. In other words, end-of-life counseling for seniors and those with disabilities and terminal illnesses by doctors provided for in the government health care plan. They removed it so that it would pass. But guess what? It got back in there. And wait till I tell you how. And some representatives are calling for an investigation. More about that in a minute. But as I said, Representative Michelle Bachmann and her colleagues found and brought to the American people that they found $105 billion more hidden in Obamacare. And not only that, the Congressional Budget Office found that actually Obamacare is going to cost $100 billion more than reported because of subsidies. Well, the the GOP House is working feverishly to repeal it. And not just because of death panels, not just because $105 billion was found in there that was hidden and not reported, because remember, as Nancy Pelosi said,
we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
But here's some of the other things in Obamacare. Let's not forget, because you know what? This can be repealed. Healthcare can be reformed, and we can get it right. The hazards, the risks, the problems, the concerns in, well, everything that's going on right now, but specifically we're talking about healthcare. I mean, here are some of the things in H.R. 3962, which is Obamacare. Number one, it permits federal taxpayer funding of abortion services above and beyond the status quo of the current law. Number two, it provides for a healthcare czar called the Health Choices Commissioner, who could forcibly enroll individuals in government-run insurance and whose tasks include requiring random compliance audits on Americans' health benefits plans. It also allows for community organizations, quote-unquote, like Acorn and Planned Parenthood, to assist the Health Choices Commissioner in enrolling individuals in the health insurance exchange. I've got a whole list here, just a few more. I'm going to try to get this up on the website so you can have the full list here of what we now know is in it, not just speculated what would be in it. But it also has inadequate citizenship and legal status verification standards for those that can get Obamacare. It has 13 new and different tax increases. It also facilitates social engineering policies such as rewriting current tax law to allow domestic partners to be treated as spouses. It imposes a surtax starting in 2011 on high-income people, and it fails to hold members of Congress to the same healthcare system requirements that we, the people, Americans, will have to live under because of Obamacare. It creates dozens of new bureaucracies. As a matter of fact, 111 to be exact. And it provides for end-of-life counseling and government-controlled end-of-life care, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Remember all the furor from the mainstream media when Sarah Palin brought out to the public that there were death panels included in Obamacare, and they called her stupid and ignorant, and that wasn't true, and so forth. Well, guess what? It was true. However, the Democrat-controlled House, Senate, and White House took the death panels out so that it would get passed. But then the Obama administration, through Medicare regulation, added it back in. And that has been discovered. Really appreciate what Congress is doing. I mean, not only, as we reported, Michelle Bachmann and her colleagues found out that there was $105 billion hidden in Obamacare that was not told to Congress. Because why?
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
But also, the Congressional Budget Office reported that Obamacare is actually going to cost $100 billion more than reported because of subsidies. Well, GOP healthcare official Representative Fred Upton is investigating the end-of-life counseling regulation that, as I said, Sarah Palin famously referred to as death panels, which is a rule that was stripped from the president's healthcare law following all the controversy, but stealthily added back by administrative fiat. Now, Upton and 3 members of his committee say in a letter of their intent requesting a briefing that Kathleen Sebelius's decision, she's the Secretary of Health and Human Services, her decision to add the end-of-life planning without notice or public comment shows that there appears to be no limits to her power under Obamacare. So here we go again. First it's in, then it's out, then it's in. And who knows what else is being done behind closed doors or is in the bill. All in legalese, mind you. I mean, my head just hurts thinking about what would be involved if I were a congressman having to read that. And of course, time wasn't given, right? Because Nancy Pelosi said,
we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
And that's what they did. Well, here's the other side of that coin. Whether the death panels stay in or out now because the controversy is up again, as Wesley Smith of the Discovery Institute and advisor for the Center for Bioethics and Culture, he pointed out just a couple of days ago in an article talking about Paul Krugman, who was on a television interview. He claimed that the cost-benefit board established over private Medicare by Obamacare will be able to impose more or less binding judgments refusing care, and that these refusals will, quote, save a lot of money in the context of treating the elderly and others, such as people with disabilities and terminal illnesses. He says that the panel will prevent treatment that isn't medically useful. So whether we have death panels or not, in Obamacare, they have a board that has been established to decide what kind of treatment you can get, end of life, disabilities, terminal illnesses, and it's based on how much it will cost. You know, this was one of the issues that was hotly debated about Obamacare. It's still in there. A board is there. A panel is there. And basically, government's going to decide what you get or not. Now, as Wesley Smith points out, this is akin to imposing a duty to die, because when we reach a certain point in life, we'll not be able to obtain treatment we want that could keep us going. And this centralized federal control over what will and will not be provided in medicine and to whom is the biggest reason among so many why Obamacare is wrong. Smith says repeal it, reform it, replace it, and first target death panels. Wow. Well, today we're talking specifically about death panels because it definitely is on the table again. And we, the people, need to make our voices heard along with these who are investigating to make sure that this is removed, and also this panel that can regulate what treatment they will pay for or not. This already happens with our doctors and our insurance companies, whether it's Kaiser or an HMO or whatever. But should the government be deciding what treatments we get? That's at the heart of this debate. So stay with me.
A conservative in San Francisco? You bet.
I want to say that I believe it's essential for all of us to resolve to take our stand in the wave of battles that are raging and will rage both here in our nation and around the world for our families and for our freedom. You know, our families, our liberties, including religious freedom, are under siege. And it's going to take more of us suiting up and rising up and taking our stand in order to win this war.
I so appreciate your radio program. You are out there every day educating people and helping them to find the truth and know what's really going on and what a difference you have made in this world.
Well, thank you.
Won't you help us stay on the air in your area? Just go to changingworldviews.com/donation page or send your donation to Changing Worldviews, P.O. Box 750624, Petaluma, California 94975-0624.
Hey, did you know that according to the Department of Justice, human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world? Did you know that human trafficking in Sonoma County really happens? Hello, my name is Dana Bryant, co-founder of Crossing the Jordan and member of the Sonoma County Human Trafficking Task Force. Crossing the Jordan seeks to reach these victims and bring them hope of a whole new life. Giving Hope Worldwide has given us a $50,000 matching grant, which means for every dollar you give, they will match it up to $50,000. Will you join us and help save lives? Call us at 540-0810 or find us online at crossingthejordan.org.
An interview with Wesley Smith on his book, Forced Exit. Wesley is a senior fellow at the Discovery Institute, an attorney and consultant for the International Task Force on Euthanasia and Assisted Suicide. He also is on the board of the Center for Bioethics and Culture and speaks around the world on bioethics issues. Wesley, welcome back again to Changing Worldviews in this show about euthanasia and assisted suicide.
Thank you.
I'd like to read something from your book, Forced Exit, in the chapter on inventing the right to die. That's It's on page 140. And let me just read this opening paragraph here, and then I want to discuss it. In 1992, Jack Kevorkian seriously proposed in the American Journal of Forensic Psychiatry that a pilot program of death clinics be established in Michigan. The clinics, which he called obituaria, would be staffed by physician killers known as obituarists. I think that's how you say that.
Who knows?
Okay. Who would be permitted legally to terminate patients who request it in a procedure Kevorkian then called medicide, but now labels I don't know how you say that.
Pathologists or something.
Thank you. Kevorkian foresaw that the first patients to receive medicide would be the terminally and chronically ill. However, he looked forward to the eventual widening of this to include people he labeled patients tortured by other than organic diseases. What kind of motivation is behind these euthanasia proponents?
There's a lot going on there. For the people who are really what I call death fundamentalists, that is the people who are ideologically driven, as opposed to people who are worried about suffering at the end of their life and might, in a sense, casually support euthanasia, but they don't think deeply about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are ideologically driven towards this have this very radical notion of individualism and personal autonomy, that they can do with their body what they want when they want to, and it doesn't matter who else gets hurt authorizing it. What I find quite remarkable isn't that people might decide that that's how they feel about themselves, but for some reason they want the sanction of the law on it, and indeed the authority figure of the doctor giving permission. It's almost a paradox there, isn't it?
Yes.
And Jack Kevorkian, when I read that, I thought he was completely out on a limb, completely whacked out. The idea that people should be able to go to euthanasia clinics, like in Soylent Green, where E.G. Robinson goes to the movie Soylent Green goes to die at a euthanasia clinic. It was a movie that came out in the early 70s, and I remember being utterly shocked. But Jack Kevorkian wasn't so far out at all, because in the mental health field, there are many people, it's not the majority approach yet, but there are many people who believe in what is called rational suicide, and that is that instead of a psychiatrist, psychologist, or mental health professional, instead of their job being to save the life of suicidal patients, which of course is what they should be doing, that their job is to non-judgmentally, we must always be non-judgmental, and we must help them go through a dispassionate decision-making process, as if we're buying a stereo and we have to decide between Sony and Panasonic. Instead of saving lives, if the psychiatrist believes that the suicide would be, quote, rational as opposed to irrational and perhaps, something that was spur of the moment, then they are to give permission for the suicide under this theory and to even perhaps tell the patient how to do it or perhaps assist it, which brings us to the Netherlands. This very kind of thing is going on, and let me describe what has happened in the 30 years in which the Dutch doctors have been permitted to engage in euthanasia. This began in 1973 in a court case where a judge said that if a doctor follows certain guidelines, you always hear about these protective guidelines that protect against abuse. Well, once you decide that killing is good in some cases, then the guidelines cease to be protections and become perceived as obstacles to hurdle over to get to that good. And you'll see what happens is that the guidelines are either stretched to the point where they don't exist or evaporate or are totally ignored with impunity.
Wow.
And that's what's happened in the Netherlands. The guidelines that were later put into law and still are part of Dutch law, repeated requests by the patient. No other thing could be done other than killing to alleviate suffering, second opinions, things of this sort. In the 30 years since Dutch doctors began killing patients, Dutch doctors have gone from killing terminally ill people who ask for it, to chronically ill people who ask for it, to disabled people who ask for it, to depressed people who aren't even physically ill who ask for it. Remember what Jack Kevorkian said? And that was a Dutch Supreme Court case called Chabot, C-H-A-B-O-T, where Dr. Chabot, and I use the term loosely, is a psychiatrist, and he had a patient named Hilly. Hilly wanted to commit suicide, had attempted it once and failed, and the reason she wanted to commit suicide was her children had died. One had died of cancer, and the other had died of suicide, and she had become obsessed about being buried between them. She'd purchased the cemetery plot, she'd put one child on one side, the other on the other, and the only thing missing in her great grief that she was experiencing was her cadaver to be put in the ground. Well, this psychiatrist, Dr. Chabot, saw her 4 times over 5 weeks, never tried to treat her, then assisted her suicide. And the Dutch Supreme Court said that was appropriate and right.
Wow.
Because suffering is suffering. suffering, they said. It doesn't matter whether it's organic or emotional. That is the logic of euthanasia, and that is where we go when we start saying killing is an acceptable answer to the difficulties of human suffering. It gets worse in the Netherlands.
Well, you know what? Hold on to that. We've got to take a quick break. We will come right back to that.
It's time for The Legal Edge with Brad Dacus.
Pacific Justice Institute has filed a complaint in federal district court against the Kansas State Board of Education. Now, the complaint seeks an injunction against implementation of state science standards which promote atheistic beliefs that are inconsistent with theistic religious beliefs. To PJI, an exclusive atheistic perspective in school science is just wrong. I'm Brad Dacus.
To find out more, log on at pacificjustice.org.
Just wanted to thank you very much for your support. Without your help, we couldn't do what we're doing, and with so much that's going on in the world, it's so important to do what we are doing. And I want to ask you if you would please join us so that our platform would increase to get the truth out on the issues.
Congratulations on 10 years. That's amazing. Radio is kind of a debugging experience as we learn more and more about things that we thought were true, but we find out were not true, and we peel the layers of the onion.
If you'd like to change the world, won't you partner with us? Just go to changingworldviews.com/donation page or send your donation to Changing World Views, P.O. Box 750624, Petaluma, California 94975-0624. You'll not only help us stay on the air in your area, but it's a way to let Sharon know you're standing with her.
It's the kind of education that one could never get in conventional education. And I know you bring on some great experts over the years, and it's just a great experience.
Well, I just want to encourage our listeners to get a hold of Wesley Smith's book, Forced Exit. It's a tremendous book, and this is an issue that is just not going to go away, and we need to understand it, not just for ourselves, but for our families, for public debate. We need to be a resource for others, and we need to know how to vote and how to hold our legislators accountable. I want to encourage you to get a hold of this book.
Yeah, they can go to my website, www.wesleyjsmith.com, go to the book section, and there will be a link to get Culture of Death there. And a book called Power Over Pain that I co-authored with Dr. Eric Shevlin, who's a pain control specialist, which is a consumer's guide to getting good quality pain control.
Okay, great. Well, before we went to the break, you were talking about what was going on there with the Dutch and in the Netherlands and so forth. And in your book on page 118, you give some examples, or you actually list some statistics of some of those that have occurred. There were 2,300 patients were euthanized by their doctors upon request, and 400 people died through physician-assisted suicide for a total of 2,700. That was approximately 3% of deaths involving end-of-life medical care, but the equivalent percentage in the United States would be approximately 41,500 deaths.
That's correct. And by the way, those statistics are very understated because Dutch doctors, even though it's required in the guidelines, don't report more than 50% of euthanasia deaths. And getting back to what's going on there, Dutch euthanasia has entered the pediatric wards where babies born with birth defects and who are going to be disabled are murdered by doctors or killed by doctors, legalized murder, based on quality of life issues. This is eugenic infanticide.
My goodness.
And it's, according to the Lancet, a British medical journal, about 8% of all Dutch infant deaths are caused by doctors giving a lethal injection to people because they're going to be disabled in life.
Disabled like Down syndrome?
Well, it could be Down syndrome. It could be, one of the cases had to do with spina bifida, where the baby is born with a opening in the back at the spine and often has hydrocephaly, which is fluid on the brain. And the proper treatment is obviously to close the lesion on the back, drain the fluid on the brain. Sometimes these folks grow up to be very disabled, sometimes barely disabled at all. One of Bill Clinton's major economic advisors in his first term was a woman who uses a wheelchair who had been born with severe spina bifida. I mean, the idea that for some reason that it's better to be dead than to be disabled, which of course is inherent in the euthanasia movement, which the disability rights groups are unanimously opposed to legalized euthanasia. They're some of the most most righteous and hard fighters against legalizing killing as an answer to human suffering because they know they're the targets. But this doctor, instead of treating the child, killed the child after 3 days, and the Dutch court said, okay with us, and now it's legal.
Well, and then we've got Peter Singer here in America that advocates you can kill a baby, up to 6 months out?
Up to a year.
Up to a year.
Again, getting back to the last show, we talked about the difference in bioethics between a person and a non-person, and that in bioethics it isn't being human that gives ultimate value, it's having sufficient cognitive capacity. And that in Peter Singer's view, and in many bioethicists, a newborn infant is not a person because they are not yet self-aware over time and cannot yet be held morally accountable for actions. Therefore, they have the moral worth of a fish. And so what is happening in the Netherlands, that is eugenic infanticide, is precisely the kind of thing that Peter Singer says should be legal and allowed, occurring in the Netherlands, where about 80 to 100 infants a year are killed by doctors. German doctors did that during World War II, killed disabled babies, and were hanged for it at Nuremberg. Dutch doctors now do it, and it's called medical ethics.
Well, and here in America, the partial birth abortion, let's face it, that's no different.
The late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was not pro-life, called it infanticide because that's exactly what it is. My studies, I wrote about it in Culture of Death, 3,000 to 5,000 a year, which means you're talking about quite a few every day, 3 to 4 every day, and almost all of these have nothing to do with the woman's health or a baby who has a physical problem.
So what happened to the Hippocratic Oath? First,
do
no harm.
The Hippocratic Oath is as relevant today as the Model A Ford for people. Dr. Sherwin Newland, who's the doctor who wrote How We Die, big best-selling book, and is a big bioethicist at Yale Medical School and physician, basically said in a New England Journal of Medicine diatribe against people who are trying to stop euthanasia that the Hippocratic Oath is only relevant because it provides a form of professional cohesion. But I tell Dr. Newland that if he wants professional cohesion, he should join the Rotary Club. The Hippocratic Oath requires doctors to give each patient optimal care and believe in their ultimate moral worth, which is why when I tell my audiences that only about 13% of American doctors even take the Hippocratic Oath, there is a stunned sigh or gasp of shock, because people want their doctors to take that Hippocratic value system seriously.
Absolutely. When you're a patient, you are vulnerable, and you have to be able to trust.
They can cut us, they can drug us, they see us naked, they know our most intimate details of our lives, which is necessary for proper care, and so forth. And by the way, Dutch doctors now, remember we talked about why forced exit. Dutch doctors kill more than 1,000 people a year who have not asked to be killed. According to Dutch government studies, they call it termination without request or consent. It even has a name. This year I was debating a Dutch ethicist at a Fulbright event in Lisbon, Portugal, and I pointed out in that event that about 1,000 patients a year are killed by doctors, which is still murder under Dutch law, that, because they haven't asked to be killed, that's still murder under Dutch law, that these killings occur as a matter of routine, that they're almost never prosecuted. The very few times, I know of maybe 8 or 10 over many years of prosecutions for doing this, are mostly found not guilty, and the few times where there have been guilty verdicts, there has been no real punishment, like 2 weeks probation, and no professional criticism. And you know what the Dutch ethicist said to me? He said, well, of course we believe we should have laws to tell doctors proper medical practice, but of course they should not be enforced. Right out!
Wow, amazing.
Because, see, they believe that killing is beneficence, good, so these guidelines cease to be protections but become obstacles to be circumvented or ignored.
Well, there's some of your redefinition of death there, and it certainly is a betrayal of medicine. Wesley, when we come back, I want to talk about Nazi Germany eugenics and how that ties into what we're seeing here today. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. These are amazing times that we're living in. So let me encourage you as you listen to the news and you seek to educate yourself on the issues. Stay alert, stay informed, because we indeed do live in a changing world. So until I see you tomorrow, this is Sharon Hughes saying it like it is.
Thanks for listening to Changing Worldviews with Sharon Hughes. You can get more information on today's topic or order a CD of today's show by visiting changingworldviews.com. or writing us at Changing Worldviews, P.O. Box 750624, Petaluma, California, 94975-0624. You can also contact us at talk@changingworldviews.com. That's talk@changingworldviews.com. Our program is listener-supported, and we appreciate your tax-deductible donations to help us get the truth out on the important issues Sharon addresses on the show. So until next time, remember, stay alert, stay informed. We live in a changing world.